Are you ready?
Let's do this.
Welcome to the Professor G Podcast, featuring Dr. U. Now, here's Professor G and Dr. U.
What's up, everyone? It's Professor G.
Dr. U.
And we're here today to talk about and prepare students for this fall semester. But we gotta share something. We've been chatting a little bit about, what's happening in the world and really want to take some moments to acknowledge some of the trauma that our youth have experienced here. And not only our youth, everyone.
Right. I think when we think about starting college, how college is going to begin for people, oftentimes we as professionals reflect, well, when I was in college, this is what I did. When I was in college, this is what I thought about. And I think for me as a professor now, a lot of that has to be suspended because of such an interesting time that our students are entering school in particular, like the world changing events like COVID.
Yeah, let's be honest, man. We're now in August of 2023, but something critical happened March 2020, right? About 3 years ago, the world stopped.
Right. Not only the world stopped, but so did schools. And not only did schools stop, but they shut down for a minimum almost 2 years, 1.5 years, depending where you were at. But places where I lived at the time, schools were shut down for almost 2 whole years. That means kids who were freshmen went to school, and about time their sophomore year or in the middle of their freshman year, the school shut down for almost 2 years.
Right. And I mean, imagine what that did to everybody, right? I mean, I know when I was, I'm thinking back March 2020, it wasn't that long ago where I was going to work one day and then all of a sudden they call me and say, don't come to work. And my kids, I got 3 kids and they were all in school, and all of a sudden they can't go to school. And it was a trip. It was literally a trip, man. I was like, what the hell is going on
Right.
here?
Not only the trip, but it was an event that I, as an educator, as a parent, was not prepared for. And I know for a fact I'm not the only person, parent, professor who was not prepared for those events. And so for everyone, I think we have to acknowledge that things changed.
That's right. And so, looking back, I remember, one of my brother-in-laws, he was at UC Santa Cruz having the time of his life when it all came crumbling down and he had to move back home. And, it's like, whoa, I was just at the university. I was studying my butt off and partying, having a blast. And now I'm stuck at home for 2 years.
Right. So I think first and foremost, I would like to acknowledge that a lot of the students that I've currently worked with had to navigate that. Some of it, their freshman year, sophomore year of high school, or last 2 years of high school, or even their first year of college. I've met students who, started as a freshman at one school and then now they're back home or had to go back home, and that completely changed their trajectory of what they were doing. So not only did the students change, but I think the schools changed as well.
Let's be honest. No one was ready to go online. No one. I don't care what schools say. I was there in counseling. Trust me, when I was counseling, they had never really ever done online counseling. Not one time. Even counseling where I come from at my institution, counselors couldn't even teach online classes before 2020. And all of a sudden, all of our classes are online. And it was a true shock and trauma to the system of professionals, but not, like we said, not only professionals, kids, other adults, students in general. I mean, the world, right? It was a trauma and a shock to all of us. And colleges are still going through those changes and are still suffering from the trauma of 2020 that COVID brought.
Right. I know for me, I always had a little bit of online element to my classes, but again, this was the middle of a semester. It was all of a sudden everything and the uncertainty that came from it, of not knowing what the following semester would be and how we would deliver, or we're going to be online, in person, So I think first and foremost, when I think about where students are at and kind of having this conversation of college, I think it's important to acknowledge that everything changed, and what I knew as a student, as a professional, is kind of out the window. And I think right now is a time of figuring it out together.
And, on top of that, it's not just things changed. We lost a lot of good people.
Right.
And my heart goes out to those families who, prior to, the vaccination and prior to really understanding the disease, the global pandemic that was happening, I lost a really good friend from Sacramento City College.
Right.
And it breaks my heart because he was my go-to guy, for helping students secure financial aid. And, he was one of those, guys that just we loved, right? And that students knew and loved. And, Ruben, I know you're listening. So, we still think about you on a daily basis, and we fight that same fight you used to fight. And so, if you lost, some of our students lost family members, right? Lost parents, right? Aunts and uncles, there was children. There was just so much death that, we never really have acknowledged the trauma of some of our kids and some of our students that we work with, whether they're adults or young people, the death that and the loss of what the pandemic caused in their lives, and so we still carry that, and we acknowledge that, a lot of our staff and students carry that as well.
Right. And on top of that, there was also a large political change in the country, right? These are the same students and youth and professionals who witnessed the murder of George Floyd back in May 25th. And for a lot of communities, unfortunately, this is not something new, but this definitely was a straw that broke the camel's back this time, and the amount of unrest that came from that. And that unrest also trickled its way onto college campuses too. It's not like college campuses operate in a vacuum.
That's right. And that all happened, just a couple months after COVID.
Right.
So not only are we suffering through the trauma of a global pandemic, now we have the murder of George Floyd, recorded, right? Where, and I hate to say it, for, my Black and brown community, it's no surprise, right? But it was quite a surprise to a lot of other cultures and a lot of other people who never saw those kinds of behaviors from our law enforcement officials, right? And it was quite traumatic. Another piece of trauma that the world has to deal with of the violence, those few bad apples in law enforcement, enforce, on people of color. And it was hard to watch those 8 minutes of just a man suffering under the knees of a system that where I come from, and I often share this with people is where I come from, when I was growing up, and you can Google this, King City police scandal. 30 years of active discrimination by the law enforcement officials of King City, California against the Mexican immigrant community, right? And my father and my family were victims of that as well. And again, no surprise because we would feel it and see it throughout our lives, but it was a surprise to quite a bit of the country when that incident happened.
Right. And it also led to colleges having to face their own issues around race and racism and their hiring practices. So you have all these pressures occurring at once. You have all of a sudden, the inequalities built into our college really highlighted by COVID and really pointing out the differences of student experiences. On top of that, there's larger racial awakening around the country that also trickles its way to the college campus to highlight some of the historical legacies that they've engaged in of excluding particular communities. And then on top of this, you have this general uneasiness about our economy and political system, and I remember before class watching this whole thing play out as the January 6th attack, right? You have this, but again,
an uprising
of people who lost an election, who firmly believe that it was their, that they were going to start this next civil war, et cetera, et cetera. But you see this play out over and all in like a short amount of time. And so I think for me as a professor, when I think about how do we get ready, I think the first thing is acknowledging all the change that our students have gone through in such a short period of time, right? If you were a sophomore in 2021, right? You're now going to enter your freshman year of college. And so that means your freshman, sophomore year, junior year of high school, you've experienced
you've been through a lot of trauma. Trauma. Like, let's be honest. Right. This is trauma. You've been through a lot of trauma and, we expect you to just kind of get over it. I mean, well, you can't get over trauma like that.
No. And I think the unjust part of this is that this is not acknowledged acknowledged by a lot of professionals, by a lot of our institutions. And so again, thinking about this fall, I'm constantly thinking about, well, how are we going to acknowledge the realities of the context in which these students are? And this is just localized, right? This is just within our country. It's not even talking about the international things that have occurred. And another part that constantly rings up in my head is all these mass shootings too. Like,
man, I think there in 2023 there have been over 300 mass shootings just in this year. That means more than one a day.
No, I believe it. 4th of July weekend there was like 5 or 6 across the country. But right, these are the same students again who had to live through. And if they're here with us, right, they survived COVID, right? They are the same students who had to acknowledge racism pretty blatantly in their face in ways that other generations have not had to. This is the same group of students who have to acknowledge the political unrest that we are still grappling with. There's a large population of people who want to see a civil war occur because...
Well, let's rephrase that. Not a civil war, a race war.
Right. Because some of us are going to school and some, on top of the mass shootings that are occurring at, elementary schools, malls, et cetera, et cetera. And within that, you also have this large political uprising of this culture wars where you have people banning books, whitening curriculum, right? The latest ones in Florida where they said slavery was beneficial to African Americans and, people were calling
the Supreme Court, eliminating affirmative action policies, right?
CRT bans
and just blatant attack on our LGBTQ communities, right? Just cut out. But I remember just going to school. Just people. There was an old saying that says, and I hate it that I don't remember who said it, but first they come for you, right, and then they come for me. And so, it's culture wars that are happening, and they're still happening to this day. I mean, just look at our Supreme Court. They eliminated the woman's right to choose as well.
Right. So there is so much uncertainty occurring. There's so much of, and not to be a downer, right? But there is a lot that I think we as professionals have to acknowledge that our students have experienced. And I know for me personally, I'm just happy when they show up. Like my biggest goal right now and the best thing they could do to prepare themselves for this is to first acknowledge what has happened and acknowledge how this has impacted you. Right, you as a student, as a future student, like dealing with this. And then 2, if you're going to take that step to enroll in college and what's next is I'm happy you're there because there's a lot of people who aren't there with you, who couldn't be there with you because of these life-changing, global life-changing events that occurred.
Yeah, and this, I'll remember, happened in the last 3 years, and it's still happening today. So, if you're one of those students that's starting, next week, next couple of weeks is when school starts again, right? Fall 2023. You carry this baggage with you, right? And when you open up your social media accounts, you see it. Right. When you pull up, a news article, you see the next attack on a school or the next attack on a law that's built to protect and help eliminate discrimination, eliminate racism. You see those types of laws now getting pulled off of the books, and which can only mean, a couple of things, that laws are now being used as weapons against, certain individuals, against certain groups of people. And you live it, right? You live it every day. And we want to be there and to tell you that we acknowledge that. And like Dr. Yu says, we're happy that you're here. We're happy that you're coming back, and we're there to support you in any way we can.
Right. And so I think for me, the biggest thing that you could do is first show up, right? Show up, reactivate that, retry, give it another shot, show up.
Is it going to be the same as you remember 4 years ago? No, absolutely not.
And that's another thing, right? So not just show up, but change your expectations of what this possibly could mean and what this is. And I think right now we're at such a unique space where I think colleges are trying to figure out, professors are trying to figure out, students are trying to figure out, but this is the time when we are all trying to figure out where your voice could be most heard, where you can have the most input and say, and what direction we go. And so not just show up, but show up, be present and active in that decision making. And that could be as simple as, sharing what worked for you to your professors, or,
and what didn't work for you.
Right. And what didn't work for you. But in order to do that, you have to show up.
Right. And what I've noticed over the last couple of years as well is that a lot of our spirit for learning has disappeared because the learning environment changed so much abruptly, right? Everything went online, everything went distant education, and not all of us had the same resources. We didn't have the microphones. We didn't have the laptop high-speed internet access. We didn't have the quiet space where I can turn on my camera and my professor can see me, right? Or my high school teacher can see me. We didn't have those kinds of environments. And a lot of our kids, if you're in a one-bedroom apartment with, a couple brothers and sisters, you can't turn on the camera. You're still there and you're trying, but now, those educators might feel like, you're not present when deep down inside your heart, you're trying to be present as much as possible. So, looking back on all of the trauma that's happening, Dr. Yu, how has all of this changed the way you teach in the classroom, in the college setting?
Yeah, first and foremost, right, there was times I feel like I couldn't turn on my camera because I got kids running around and I couldn't find a quiet space. So a part of me also disinvested from the process too, right? A part of me took a step back and tried to grapple with all these changes myself, right? As a person also who lived through this. And I think I'm still trying to make sense of it myself. And I think one of the biggest things is recognizing that the world has changed, the student has changed, even the medium in which they learn has changed. So for me, it's been trying to incorporate, hence this podcast, right? Various forms of technology into the classroom, really changing deliverables of what does constitute as learning, right? And so I think for me, that's different for me versus this generation, is having so much tools and access to create knowledge in new ways, right? To speak their truth in new ways. And for me, it's been how could we use social media as a tool and not necessarily as a hindrance, right? I know people are flipping out by whatever the chat GP or
chat GPT, AI, they're going to write your papers now for you and professors won't know. All the with all technologies, there's always the doomsday, it's over.
I don't care, right? I don't care, because that's not where we're at in the world, right?
AI ain't going away.
No,
let's just be honest.
Just
right?
just
like Uber and Lyft ain't going away.
Just like back in the day, I had to spell certain words and pick up the dictionary, sound it out. No, that's what spell check is for now. That's
Grammarly.
That's no longer relevant. And so for me is, how do I utilize the tools that they have, or how do they utilize the tools they have to inform how we teach? And this is, for me, is how do I learn from my students to be a better teacher? Because if I look to my elders, well, then we're going to replicate what has been done before. And that might have worked at some point for some people, but right now that's not where we're at. And so I really try to use technology in a way, because the how they learn, how they disseminate information, how they connect with each other is different. And if my job is to help you see yourself in different ways, to expand your ability to advocate for yourself, to help you become the best you that you can, then I need to lean into your strengths. Right. And
so would you say some of your assignments may include videos?
Oh, hell yeah.
And audio.
Yeah. We now create websites.
And you never did that before?
No, I used to sign papers and do tests like everyone else, because that's how I was taught, right? And I was taught that there was a certain thing that I needed to accomplish. If I was going to help you advance your career, then I needed to, bust your ass essentially and train you up in the ways that I was trained.
And the days of you receiving a 20-page research paper from every student,
right,
would you say that day's pretty much over?
They're done. Unless this is what you're going to do, right? And if this is an environment that you signed up for and you're going to be a researcher, then yeah, we could do that. But for my average student, especially in the introductory class, first gen student, that's not not where we're going. So I'm not going to use the tools of the past to hold you back or say that you can't do this when the entire education game has changed itself, right? That's like me applying old school rules to a new game and saying, how you do it is not going to work. That's irrelevant. How I'm teaching you, if I teach you the way I was taught, that's irrelevant. That's not going to help you advance in the ways that you need to. My job is to help uplift you, not hold you back.
And even as even the modality that you teach in, right? I would imagine 3 or 4 years ago, prior to COVID and the whole pandemic changing everything, right? And all these different events happening. Prior to this, I think you were a traditional teacher. You taught in-person classes to 30 or 40 students in a classroom and just lectured, right? How has that changed?
Oh, I mean, almost half of my teaching assignments are online. We don't have connection anymore, and so now it's up to me to use these short videos, these short presentations, these various social media tools to disseminate information and to use them as tools for them to communicate with each other and build community and network and really utilize this now as an opportunity to learn.
So do you think colleges will ever go back to fully in-person teaching?
No.
No, huh? No. I don't either. There's no way, right?
And statistically, and this goes back to the change that has happened, right? A lot of our students are the students who had to bear the brunt of COVID. They were the essential workers, right? I got to stay home. I'm extremely privileged. I got to stay home for 2.5 years and teach in my chanclas.
That's right.
In my dress-up sweats.
That's right.
Right.
Waist down, you're in shorts.
Yeah.
Waist up, you might have a nice shirt on.
Right. Sometimes I just show up all, hey, I'm dealing with this too. But I think things have changed, right? And we have to acknowledge it. And I think for students to hold themselves to an expectation of something they never experienced or something they think that they have to be or what was is impossible. And the same things for the institutions. They have to adjust to the new student. And if they don't, they won't survive, right? There was a lot of colleges that shut down during COVID because they didn't adjust, they didn't pivot, they didn't learn how to survive with the new student body. And so whether we like it or not, our students are the ones who took the brunt of COVID, right? They're the ones who had to work extra shifts because their parents got laid off or they got sick, right? They're the ones who were essential workers. So they were the ones filling Amazon orders. They were the ones doing all that work. And now they still have to work, not including how much it costs to live now. So they're still working. They're still working extra shifts. They're still working odd jobs. They're still doing all these various things just to survive.
That's right. And so like you were saying earlier in this podcast is your expectations as a student now, right, have to change because, I've been looking at class schedules, helping people kind of figure out what classes to take. Every single class now has an online component, whether you like it or not. The days of just in person by themselves are gone. There is an online component now to 100% of the classes. And what I was finding just looking at different class schedules from different community colleges and universities is that 40 to 50% of the classes being offered are fully online, meaning you do not have to show up ever to the campus, right? You can do all of your business online, whether it's with admissions and records or financial aid or, the days of just jam-packed parking lots is pretty much over.
I hope so.
And so, as students, right, that means a lot. Why? Your tools are different now. Is if you have some kind of online component, you are now pretty much required, if you're planning on surviving this college game now, you're pretty much required to have high-speed internet. Whether you can afford it or not. Some students, I see them taking classes at a Starbucks, right? They park next to Starbucks. they're using the Wi-Fi there or another company or a business locally because they might not have the resources, right, to have the high-speed wireless internet, in their home. I see a lot more students maybe on campus, but hanging out in the library doing work, right? Because now they're using the wireless internet that the campus provides because they might not have those resources at home. So, those kinds of things have changed dramatically, right? laptops, let's be honest, before you can get away with, kind of desktop or even potentially your phone for a lot of things. Nowadays, I see just, there's laptops literally everywhere now. And it was already starting to go that way, but now I see almost every single student that has the resources or even is able to borrow, in some cases, laptops, from the college or something, having it, because you really, really have to have those kinds of technological tools so that you can, produce the work that the new college environment is and requires.
And I think because it's such a new environment where there is no longer that face-to-face, I think communication is going to be an extremely important tool for students to use, and it's something that most adults don't have. But being able to communicate with your professor what's going on, hey, like, this is happening, it's easier to let someone know as it's happening versus down the road, like, oh, I didn't do this because this happened. Like, being able to communicate effectively and often is going to be a saving grace, especially when there's no relationship or in-person type of communication. So being able to communicate your needs and also your faults up front and early is going to be very important. As you're talking, made me think about communication and be key,
and understanding how your professor communicates, because there's some professors that are resistant to the technology changes. So you as a student might be way ahead of that professor's capacity, right? And like with anything in college, you have to adjust to that professor's capacity. So if that professor insists on email, then, believe it or not, most of the younger crowds, they don't like email at all.
No, but it's also good to practice, because that's the official communication of the college, is usually the official communication of your work. And you're going to get to a point where you want to keep your personal stuff separate from your work stuff. So it's a good practice to start using those things, just think as future tools that will help you later to delineate your personal time versus your work time. Communication is going to be a big one, but also time. Because this is still a class, you still have to invest a certain level of time.
Let me elaborate a little more on that. Is, for example, if you're taking a 3-unit class, it's expected you put in, say, 56 hours of time towards those 3 units. And that doesn't include the additional time, like connecting with the professors, communicating, outside of class, those kinds of things. So it's really for a 3-unit class, which is the traditional size of a college level class, you're looking at, maybe 70 to 80 hours of your time being dedicated to being successful in this class.
Right. So I think that's a misconception often. What's online, therefore, it's just different. In some aspects, they're a lot harder. They're a lot harder to teach as a professional, and they're also a lot harder to take sometimes. But since that is the avenue that which works for a lot of people, you also have to invest a little bit of time to get the results you want and communicate your needs in that process.
Yeah. So one of the major changes for those of you out there that are starting college is really understanding the differences of the modalities of the class. So Dr. Yu, can you tell me the difference between, say, if I sign up for an online class that's asynchronous versus synchronous? Like, what does that mean, and what do you teach most of?
Yeah. So asynchronous class means the work is going to be all done on you. Usually that we'll never have a meeting time. We'll never have a time in which we'll touch basis. But usually how the professor does it is he'll set up due dates and kind of pace the course out as if it were a class that you showed up for. And so that's when your deadlines, your communications are being extremely important, and fitting the class into your work schedule or life schedule will be important to you. From this time, every day I'm going to dedicate an hour or 2 to this class, whether it be reading, assignments, blah, 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 blah. That's an asynchronous class.
So let me throw my example out there just in case, right? So if I sign up for an asynchronous class for the fall semester, which is about to start here in the next few weeks, that semester usually lasts 16 weeks.
Correct.
Right? So I can log in and log out of that class if it's asynchronous, basically whenever I want.
Correct.
Right? But if I think that I'm just going to do it all in the last week of the 16 weeks.
Absolutely horrible idea. Right? Because, you're cramming in what you would do normally in an hour and a half, 2-day-a-week course into 1 week, right? There's a lot of information to process and assignments to do.
So I gotta be more responsible.
Yes.
Whenever I sign up for an asynchronous class, meaning I gotta ensure that that I'm logging in every week doing 3 to 6 to 8 hours of class work every week, so that by the time the 16 weeks are done, I've committed those 50, 60, 70 hours that course requires.
It's funny because we have a tool on the websites we use that show how much time you've logged in, right? And so you can see like, oh, this.
So I can't lie to you and say, Professor, I logged in yesterday for 5 hours.
Nah, because I seem like, oh, you did this for 16 weeks. You've been here for 8 minutes, right? Like you can't even download all the articles in that amount of time. So I think it's important to understand the difference, and the async is beneficial for some people,
right? Because if I log, maybe I work, right, and I got to log in at 9 p.m. when I'm off. Good. Okay.
All good.
So then that's asynchronous. Basically, I can log in whenever I want. Just make sure you're responsibly putting in the time every week, right? So then the difference between asynchronous is a synchronous online class. So what does that mean?
So that usually means that we meet once a week, or there's a set meeting time, and it's usually that will be on Zoom, and we'll go over the course material or whatever once a week, or for a set time, let's say from 6 p.m. until 9 p.m. We'll meet every week, and for those 3 hours, we're going to do whatever we were supposed to do in that class. But that class also is fast-paced because it's once a week. The deadline still maintained. You still got to invest a certain amount of time into the class, and all your work will still be done online. So it's pretty much the same format, but instead you have a once a week meeting where there is some type of FaceTime. You can ask general questions to me on the spot, versus the async. If you don't get something, you have to email that person right away and not wait until it's due. Versus the sync, we can have that discussion via Zoom about whatever is concerning you or whatever's coming up.
So then let me give you an example. So it's okay, sync. So if I sign up for a history class, U.S. history class, that's synchronous. That's online but synchronous, and it says on the class schedule, it says Tuesdays 6 to 9 p.m. That means every Tuesday for those 16 weeks in the fall semester, I gotta do it to Zoom, I would imagine, or one of these other technologies, right, that your campus is using. But for the most part, around here, they use Zoom. So every Tuesday between 6 and 9, I got to be on Zoom, just like all the other students.
Yep.
That class.
Just like you were in person.
It's still online.
Yep.
I still don't have to show up to the physical classroom. But I better appear on that Zoom meeting every Tuesday from 6 to 9. Now, I still have other work to do, right? That's online, but at least there's like a check-in.
Yep.
So that's the true difference between, say, and this is a synchronous class.
Correct.
Online synchronous, and the other one was online asynchronous. Got it. Makes a little sense.
Kind of. I didn't know these words until the pandemic. I had no idea.
Me
what
neither.
It meant. Yeah.
Me neither. That was only 3 years ago. So there's two types of online classes. So whenever you're signing up for a class as a new college student, you got to make sure you're signing up for what you're intending to sign up.
Yes. I've had people say, "Oh, I thought we didn't have to meet." I was like, "No, this is a sync part." Or, "Oh, I thought we were going to meet." No, this is the async part. And I'll let you know right now, the async classes fill up fastest because those are the most popular classes right now. Because
when I can log in at any time,
right? Those are the most popular classes.
And then when I have to show up on Zoom, those are probably the second most popular.
Yep. And I will say the async classes, students pass at a higher rate.
Really?
Yeah, because they're doing it at their pace, at their time, and so they're signing up faster.
As long as they're doing the work.
As long as they're doing the work. For the most part, it's the students who are coming back in person or taking the sync classes that are still figuring it out of like, oh, how do I do this? Be a college student again. Right. Versus the async, they got folks got that pretty good right now because of the last couple of years. And
you just mentioned the in-person. There are still in-person classes at all colleges. Yes. Now they're back. They're back. They came back a little less than a year ago, right? After a couple years of COVID, fully online. Now they're slowly coming back. But, like we said, less than 50% of the classes offered are in person, where you're showing up, physically like you used to years ago, right? As you walk into a classroom, say hi to everybody, kind of pick a seat, sit down, that kind of stuff. So those classes are back, but the major difference in those in-person classes is that you still submit almost all of your work online.
Correct.
So
everything I do is still online, even in-person classes. Everything I see, even after I'm done lecturing, I throw up my slides online. Like it's where it's at.
So you expect the student to then go back online to review the lectures, see the PowerPoints you were using or whatever technologies you're putting up there, videos, that kind of thing.
Correct.
And then submit their work online.
Yep.
You don't want to people to kill more trees. Paper. That day is pretty much gone for you.
Yep.
Wow. You're saving a lot of trees there, man.
I'm trying.
Because we need it. The way that the earth is warming up so fast.
We need it, or I'll lose them, right? Or I'll lose them.
So there's still an online component. So as a student, you have to really learn about all of the different online tools that your campus uses, right? Correct. So like where we're from, the Los Rios district, they use Canvas, right?
And that brings me to another point. Utilize the resources on campus. I'm a newbie to technology. Like I'm learning as you learn, as most of them.
Force because of COVID.
This is a hard transition for me. So if there's a technical difficulty, there's something that's not working out, the school has resources. They have people who are paid to do this, right? So use those numbers, read everything through and through on the syllabus, and find out where you can borrow a laptop. Find out if you can get a wireless router for your house. The school will loan you. Find out who could help you with all those technical glitches of how to convert videos and do random stuff on Canvas or Zoom, because I won't know how to do it, and most of your professors won't either.
That's right. No, let's be brutally honest here. Most of our professors, the students know way more technology.
Way more. I asked them for help.
Yeah, me too. I've had to ask a couple students.
There's no shame, right? I mean, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we prepare to enter the fall 2023 semester, right? Out here in Northern California, Los Rios Community College District, they're starting on Saturday, August 19th. Now, are you that type of professor that posts some things on your Canvas prior to that date, or do you start on that date and that's the trigger that
sometimes a couple of days after? No, I'll have some information before out to let them know, read this, read that on this date. I'll finish the rest of the stuff. But again, like them, I'm figuring it out too. So as they navigate what it means to be back in person or online or to be back in school, I'm having to learn, well, what does it mean to be a professional again also? What does it mean to administer online classes? This is all new for me also. So I think a big part of it is I try to show students grace and kind of be patient and where they're at. And I think students should also come into this expecting a level of patience as we all figure this out.
That's right. So what did you learn today? You learned that what? We all have a lot of trauma we're carrying from the last 3 years of hell, right? That the world has been through and is currently going through. When you start your classes coming back to college, it is different.
Yep.
Right? You need to change that expectation. Technology, right, is what changed the world, right? Being able to just survive COVID completely changed how colleges function, right? That in and of itself means that the systems might have a lot of hiccups because it's still changing. It's not perfect. Don't expect the colleges to be able to respond quickly. Don't expect your financial aid to be in order, because before you would go stand in a line. Now it's tech, which there's always glitches, right? There's always changes and new features that are coming out, new things that people are trying. Each professor gets to teach their classes the way they feel will have the most impact. So in your classes, they're going to get a little dose of Dr. Yu's style using technology, when in another class, it might be different, right? The professors may still be using, like, say, the Canvas learning platform, but the way they expect their work to be submitted, the way they expect you to communicate with them may be completely different. So, as new college students or even returning college students, right? Our lesson to you today is come in with that attitude that, things may be different now, or things are different.
Things are different.
And adjustment, right? Being able to adjust, being able to change the way your expectations are of an institution is what's really going to help you to survive in this new age, right? Of really coming back to an institution. And I would not expect to be fully in person ever again. And it's not because it's bad things. It's because it's good things. We become more efficient using technology. You know, our students are learning so much more. They can do so much more using technology nowadays. So it's really a positive thing that you have to be looking at, and you have to be ready to adjust as we train you how to be professionals in this new world.
Correct.
So, Dr. Yu, thank you very much for the knowledge. Thank you very much for really coming in and just sharing with us what some of the things you see as a professor, you know, one of the largest institutions of higher education in California, and really preparing our students for this new age, right, of learning.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
For more helpful tips like this, to find the quickest and most affordable way possible to get your degree, go to the App Store and download the free TecoGuide app.